Okay, well, our first episode of the second season for Next Generation is episode number 27, and it's called The Child. Now, this one originally aired on November 19th, 1988, and it was written by Jaron Summers, John Povil, and Maurice Hurley, and directed by Rob Bowman. Okay, and plot-wise, the episode begins as a shuttle from the USS Repulse leaves the Enterprise, and that shuttle is delivering the Enterprise's new chief medical officer, who is Dr. Catherine Pulaski. Dr. Crusher from Season 1, according to the storyline anyway, has taken an assignment of Starfleet Medical Headquarters, leaving Wesley Crusher still on board, but Wesley is scheduled to rendezvous with his mother, and he's kind of contemplating that decision as the episode progresses. Now, the Enterprise flies to Odet 9 to pick up several deadly plasma plague samples, and the reason that they're doing that is they're needed to develop an inoculate for an outbreak of plasma plague in the Rekelis system. And on the way, Geordi, who is now actually the chief engineer, he replicates a series of containment modules to hold the samples at zero growth for the trip. But the kick is for this one, if any of the plague samples get loose, everyone on board on the Enterprise could die. Hence the dilemma for the episode. Now, at the same time, a small energy ball suddenly zips up into the Enterprise, and it wanders around the hallways through several crewmen's quarters, and it slips through and finally finds Deanna Troi, who is sleeping, and the energy ball impregnates itself into Troi. Now, the next day, after examining the ship's counselor, Pulaski reports the extraordinary pregnancy to the rest of the crew. And at the present growth of rate for this particular baby, which is extraordinary, the birth will occur in 36 hours, so they know immediately that this is not just an ordinary baby. Now, meanwhile, the Enterprise arrives at Odet 9 and beams the plague specimens on board, and in sickbay, Troi delivers the baby, and it's without any effort at all. There's no pain or anything, which is extraordinary. And she has a baby boy, and the incredible growth rate begins to occur. Now, within a few days, he appears to be 8 years old, and Deanna Troi has decided to name him Ian Andrew after her father. Now, suddenly, one of the plasma cultures begins to grow, and if unchecked, it will break out of its containment and destroy all life on the ship. Now, the crew finally discover that Eichner radiation is causing the growth, but there's no known sources of the type of radiation on the ship, so they're kind of helpless to figure out what to do. Now, in Troy's quarters, Ian states that he is the cause of the distress on the ship, and so he says that he has to leave because he knows that he's the reason. So he begins to die, much to Troy's grief, obviously. So the child's body then dematerializes into an energy ball and tells Troi goodbye and leaves the ship. And immediately the radiation disappears and the plague sample returns to normal. Now, as I had mentioned at the beginning of this episode, also Wesley is scheduled to join his mother at Starfleet Medical, but Wesley spends most of his time during the episode in 10 Forward, which is a new set for the Next Generation. It's the bar lounge, and he talks to a woman named Guinan, played by Whoopi Goldberg, and she's in charge of the bar lounge. And she gives her wisdom to Wesley, and Wesley decides that he wants to belong on the Enterprise. He feels like this is where he needs to be, and he doesn't want to leave. So at the end of the episode, all the crew members volunteer to help Wesley out because he's still a youngin' and he won't have Dr. Crusher with him. And so they agree that as long as it's okay with Dr. Crusher, that Wesley can stay on board the ship. And that is the end of the episode. Now, of course, being the very first episode, we have a couple of new things. As I had mentioned, Dr. Pulaski is a new doctor, and Dr. Crusher, as I had mentioned in the Season 2 introduction, Gates McFadden was actually fired. and I had no idea that that was actually the case, but doing a little research I found out that's what happened. And they also hired Whoopi Goldberg to play Guinan, which I think probably gave quite a bit of a ratings boost to this episode, not to mention that it was the first one of the season. Now, this particular episode was actually not completely original. It was actually an old episode from Star Trek Phase 2, which was a proposed series after the original series that just never happened. The reason why they pulled this one out was because there was a writer's strike going on, and they needed some material, but there were no writers to do it. So at the last moment, Maurice Hurley did a little rewrite on this just to fit it to the next generation, but they didn't have to do much because the character of Ilea from Phase 2 was very similar to Troy. So this worked out very well. And this episode I liked. I thought it was a good opener, and I enjoyed it. I think as the season moves along, the episodes get certainly a lot better. This one does suffer from being the very first episode, so they're still trying to find the beginnings of the second season and what that will look like. But it does set up some interesting things here. The relationship between Pulaski and Data, which some fans didn't like, honestly, because they felt like Dr. Pulaski was kind of belittling poor Data because she is having trouble working with somebody who she considers just a machine, and she refers to Data in this episode initially as Data. And she says, "What's the difference?" And Data says, "One is my name, the other is not." So that's kind of a cute moment, I think, there, and kind of the beginning of the development of their relationship. But as I said, some people didn't like that. Comment below if you how you felt about that, the relationship between Pulaski and Data, and whether you liked Dr. Pulaski as the Doctor in the second season. That's all I have for you guys. I look forward to reviewing the rest of the episodes of this season, and stay tuned next time.